Hi, welcome to Tutorial Tuesday with Mommy-ish. Today we're going to have a tutorial on using stitching elements that you may already have in your stash for commercial use and creating brushes out of them so you can get more use out of them than just a straight stitching. Not only that, but we are also going to learn how to create a texture over it to make it look more realistic. So what I have today is a set of stitching from Wendy Page Designs. This is a really cute chain stitch that she has here. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate my image because I don't want it up and down, so I'm just going to turn it just like that. That was like a 90-degree clockwise sort of thing. And I'm going to look around at the stitching, and I can see that there's a little bit of a pattern here, but because we know how stitching works, if it's too wide, it's going to look really awkward, right? We can't do like a blanc and then another blanc. It's just not going to work the way we want it. So I want to pick one stitch out of this to use. So I'm looking at it, and I'm pretty sure that this one right here is going to be my new friend. So what do I do next? Well, I'm going to zoom in, I'm going to get out my crop tool, and I'm going to say, here's your rose, I've chosen you. All right, now I'm going to get out my eraser tool, which is right now a stitching brush because I've done this tutorial and practiced it a few times. Yeah, no reason. All right, and make it smaller. And then I'm just going to erase the bits that I don't need. And I'm going to keep in mind what the stitching shape itself is going to be like, right? So I want to keep this part here. I want it to be that chain, that really neat chain. So I have this little loop. See? Just like that. We're going to now duplicate this layer. This layer, we're going to do a color overlay of black. All right? I'll rasterize that layer. This is going to be our base brush right here. This, believe it or not, we are going to turn this into a overlay brush, which will allow us to have this textured effect on every stitch. Right? All right, so what I do typically is whenever we think about overlays, I like to think of this as a texture, just like you would with a paper. Whenever we have paper overlays, we try to go toward a mid-tone gray, which you can see here, it's at this 50% mark. It's a 7F. 7F, 7F, 7F. It's pretty close, right? And that's like our mid-tone color. So if I create a layer over this, I like to just kind of not erase, but you know, do a little fill in. And I know that I want this stitch back here to be toned closer or darker overall and maybe lighten up some of the really dark spots. So what do I do? How do I do this? Like, you're probably like, what in the world? So if you are like, what in the world? I get to teach you a new thing. So yay, yay, yes. All right, so I keep this here as my little tester. I'm going to go to the layer below it, our texture brush, future, and I'm going to go to curves. Now, we could go to levels, but I like curves today anyway, for this specific thing. Curves allow us to affect completely the tone of our, or I guess I should say like the deepness, saturation, I don't know, of an element or a picture, and you can add anchor points, which then we could make certain areas that were maybe lighter, darker, and certain areas that were darker, lighter. See how, and it's done by black here, right? And the light parts are here. Well, I don't want anything to be too light. And I'm not wanting anything to be too dark. And I'm keeping my eye on this right up here that I want to try to have the whole thing overall kind of closer to that, but with keeping dimension. We don't mind a little bit of white on there. So as you can see, that was before, this is after. It's a very subtle change, but it is important, especially if we're going to use an overlay effect, which is what I want to do. All right, so I'm going to merge these two layers together. Merge. All right, so I have our first brush. We're going to create it, define brush preset, and we're going to call this loop. And we're going to take the lower layer and do a define brush preset. and it's loop base. It doesn't really matter what these are named right now because they're just the base for a brush that we are going to make, or two brushes that we're going to be making. So I'm going to take our first one here, and then we're going to go from brush preset to brush itself. First, we can go to the tip shape, and we're going to increase our spacing so that this part is just slightly overlapping. Then we're going to use our shape dynamics. I want you to click on that. You have our size jitter, which is we are not going to play with, but what that does is it would change like the sizing of the stitch itself. The angle jitter, which would let us have a little less perfect of a brush, but we're going to leave that alone. The roundness jitter, which you can see with the height, it makes it really thin or thicker. X will flip it sideways, like the horizontal, and flipping Y will then flip vertically. But we're not going to do either of those because we want to have it set with our texture brush. Our spacing here is at 150%. Our brush size is at 50. Shape dynamics, again, angle jitter, 0, but the control, very important, set to direction. Direction, this is what you want. This allows us to do this. And without it, it would not do that. It would do this. And that's not nearly as cool, is it? No, does not look realio. We want it to look real. All right, so shape dynamics. Now we're going to save this as a new brush preset. We're going to call it Windy Loop Base. Okay. Now I'm going to get our little overlay brush here. Again, our spacing, we have to remember what was it, and if you need to write it down, write it down. For this one, it was at 150. I can see there that it's going to be overlapping just how I want it. The shape dynamics are already set exactly how we had it before. This is going to be saved as new brush preset, Windy Loop Texture. All right, so there we have it. Now, how do we get these two brushes to line up the way we want them to? Well, I'm going to tell you something. Paths are your friend. If you use a path when you're using a brush, any brushes that you use on that path start at the exact same point, follow the exact same direction. So every little nuance in that brush, as long as you don't have like the jittering and things like that on, is going to be the same. Very important. All right, so next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a layer. This is going to be our first base layer, and then we'll have another layer above that. I'm going to create a path using a shape tool. We're going to do circle, just like this. And we don't technically need the shape itself. We just need the path from it. So I'm going to double click when I go to paths. I'm going to call this stitching path and hit OK. I'm going to make sure that once I've done that, I'm going to deselect because I want to delete the circle, but I want to keep the path. And sometimes if we aren't careful, the path will delete as well. So make sure always whenever you're deleting your shape to deselect your path. All right, but now we want our path again. So I'm going to create a layer above it. This is going to be our base stitch, base stitching. All right, and now I'm going to choose a color from my my palettes here. Let's go with a brown, a nice pretty brown brush. All right, I'm going to make sure that I have my base stitching brush selected. I'm going to go to paths. We have a stitching path here, and I'm going to stroke path. Don't simulate pressure. It knows what to do. And there we have it. Now I'm going to create a layer over that one. This is our texture path. We're going to call this texture. All right. And what we're going to do is we're going to change this to, we're going to see how black does, and then we're going to see how gray does. So we're going to do black for now and see how that works. Paths, and then again, we have our stitching path, stroke path. All right. Now I'm going to zoom in so we can see this together. You can see right away that it did follow perfectly our path. So our two stitching brushes, this one and this one, followed each other. Now, why wouldn't you just have the texture brush on its own? Because it is semi-transparent. And if there was something underneath it, any of the areas that were white are see-through. This is why we have our base brush underneath it, which is the color. I'm going to clip the texture layer, so it's a Control-Alt-G, to the layer underneath it. Then I'm going to play around with my blending modes a little bit and see, do I like how soft light looks? Do I like how vivid light looks? Do I like how hard light looks, or linear light? This is hard light. And then I would then play with the opacities of this until I got a look that I really liked. Right now I'm really unsure if using black was the way to go. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to recolor this layer to gray. Like I said, we like to stick with our 50, right? There we are, 50. 7F, 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 right? Okay, it looks a little crazy right now. I'm going to rasterize this layer style, and then I'm going to choose overlay and see how that works. You can absolutely see nothing. So not working for us. Vivid light, nothing, nothing. Ah, that's something. Don't like it. Multiply. Look at that. Multiply makes it look like money. There you go. Look at that. So now we had these two brushes. They have created a totally unique stitching thing for us because we wanted a round little circle, right? And on top of that, it also has a texture on it like regular stitching would. Let's add a little bit of a drop shadow and then try to make it look a little even, a little more realistic even. Oh, or, you know, try to add it on the layer that actually matters. Maybe, you know, just for the heck of it, for fun. Here, I'm going to play around a little bit. We don't want it to be so huge. We just want it to move down a little bit like that. And then maybe be a little softer. And then maybe play with a curve real quick. Yeah, just like that. See? Whee! And maybe turn up our opacity. So there, we have stitching, just like that. Just like that. See how fast that was? No, I'm just kidding. But it allows us to really create something new. Instead of just a flat brush, we can take these elements that we already have that are in our inventory as designers and just take it to the next level. Why not? You know, why not take a little extra time? And trust me, as you save these brushes, now it's super fast. Now I have these brushes saved. I can take any shape that I want, and I'm going to do that right now. Actually, we're gonna save this. We're just gonna merge that all together. Even with the drop shadow, I know I get in so much trouble. I remember in the early days of digital scrapbooking, that was like a big thing. A lot of designers had shadows on their elements, and people would be so upset. I do not want your shadowing. I want my own shadowing. You know, it was like a really big deal. So anytime I save something with a shadow, it's usually because I've created it dynamic, and I always make sure that there is a unshaded option. So, which I guess is polite. So here I have my shape. Gonna steal the path. I'm gonna call it Stitching Heart. Deselect paths. Delete the shape because I don't want it. Create my 2 layers. Path. Select it. We're going with pink this time because it's my favorite. And you guys don't have a choice because you're watching. Oh, I can't believe you guys watch me. You're like, she's so annoying. All right, go to paths again. I have my base brush selected. Stroke it. There it is. Oh, it's so cute. It's so cute. I love it. All right, now the layer above that one. We were happy with our 7F, right? Let's see, 7F, 7F, 7F. Just like that. And we will do it again. In fact, I'm just going to go ahead and set this layer to be multiply that way. And I'm going to go ahead and clip it and everything. I'm just going to go all the way so it's just done when it's done. In fact, I will zoom in so we can sit in awe of its marvelousness. All right. I'm kidding. I hope you guys by now know that I'm kidding. Stroke path with the brush. Ta-da! All right, so it added the effect. Again, if you're not totally happy with the way that looks, try a different one. Linear burn. That adds a really nice look, and you can always decrease the opacity. And this is also a point where I maybe, if I were you, would play with styles, maybe inner glows with your stitching. Inner glows have a tendency to help us create a much more dynamic look, or even a inner shadow could. We would turn it off global light, maybe do like a -90, see how that does there. It makes it look a little poofy. I don't want that, but what I would want is maybe to create a linear burn at, let's say, 10% to just add a little little bit of dimension, just a little. Look, this is just a little. You see how that does? Just super, super light. I like that. You guys like that? I hope so, because we're sticking with it. Now merge those layers together, and I have, again, brand new, cute, my gosh, I wish it was Valentine's Day little heart. All right. Well, that's it for our tutorial for today. If you have any questions, leave them below. If you have any suggestions on a tutorial you would like to see from me, also hit me up, send me a message. I am more than willing to answer. You guys have a fantastic day. Bye-bye.